Career high for you tonight. How'd that first half feel, especially with 18 and just 20 minutes of play?
I mean, it obviously feels good, I think. For me, just playing with confidence. We're missing people, so everyone's got to do a little bit extra, be a little bit more aggressive offensively. So that was my mindset going in, and obviously it feels good to see the ball go through the net.
McBride was an all-star for the 5th time in her career as Boston goes backdoor to Hull, working on Williams. Hull gets it to go, and a foul.
It only took one moment for the entire arena to hold its breath. Lexie Hull went crashing head-to-head with Gabby Williams, hitting the floor so hard fans thought her night, and maybe the Fever's chances were finished before they had even begun. But just minutes later, Hull walked back onto the court with a swollen knot on her forehead, diving for loose balls like nothing had happened. That single act of toughness summed up everything about this Indiana Fever team. On a night meant to celebrate Caitlin Clark's superstardom, with Clark herself still sidelined, the Fever delivered a season-defining statement. And it wasn't built on hype, it was built on grit. Before the opening tip, Indiana already looked like a team in survival mode. Caitlin Clark was still sidelined with the groin injury that had kept her out since mid-July. And she wasn't alone on the injury list. Sophie Cunningham, Ari McDonald, and Sydney Coulson had all been ruled out for the season, while Chloe Beebe continued to manage lingering knee pain. That meant the Fever were missing most of their guard rotation, leaving the bench paper thin and forcing starters into heavy minutes on one of the most important nights of the season. The timing couldn't have been worse. Indiana had dropped 4 of their last 5 games, slipping dangerously close to the playoff edge. They came in with a 19-18 record, clinging to the 8th and final postseason spot, while Seattle sat just ahead of them in 6th. Every possession carried weight, not just to stop the bleeding, but to climb in a standings race, separated by a single win. For both players and fans, the urgency was impossible to ignore. Inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse, the energy before tip-off felt more like a festival than a basketball game. Banners with Caitlin Clark's new Nike logo draped across the arena, promotional shirts turned the stands into a sea of white, and fans lined up to snap photos in front of branded backdrops. It was supposed to be Clark's night, a carefully crafted celebration of her rise from rookie sensation to global icon. But there was one glaring problem. Caitlin Clark wasn't even playing. Instead, she sat courtside in warm-ups, smiling and cheering while her teammates carried the burden of keeping playoff hopes alive. The irony was impossible to miss. On the very night designed to showcase Clark's superstar aura, the Fever had to prove they could win without her. For the players on the floor, it wasn't about marketing or logos. It was about survival, and that contrast set the stage for everything that followed. The Fever's test of resilience came earlier than anyone expected. Midway through the first quarter, Lexie Hull and Seattle's Gabby Williams went diving for a loose ball under the basket. What followed was a sickening sound, the crack of 2 heads colliding so hard it echoed through the arena. Both players hit the floor, stunned and motionless, while the crowd gasped in unison. Hull staggered off, clutching her forehead as the swelling began almost immediately. The camera zoomed in on the rising lump, and fans at home winced while the fieldhouse fell silent. For a team already decimated by injuries, losing Hull felt like the breaking point. She isn't Indiana's leading scorer, but she's their energy, guarding top players, chasing 50-50 balls, and setting the tone on defense. Without her, the Fever's already thin rotation seemed stretched to the breaking point. In that moment, the question wasn't if they could win, it was how they'd even survive the night. Just when it seemed like the Fever had lost another soldier, the impossible happened. Minutes after being helped off the floor, Lexie Hull reappeared at the scorer's table, knot on her forehead still visible, and checked back into the game. The crowd erupted, almost in disbelief. This wasn't a cautious return. On her very first possession, Hull dove headfirst onto the hardwood for a loose ball, as if the collision had never happened. That single act flipped the entire mood inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse. What looked like a setback instantly became fuel. Teammates fed off her energy, the bench rallied, and the fans had a new symbol of toughness to cling to. Hull didn't just play, she battled. She finished with 9 rebounds, hounded Seattle's guards, and posted a team best plus 31. Coaches, teammates, even the front office called her the definition of tough. Hull's decision to keep fighting, lump and all, gave the Fever something far bigger than numbers. It gave them an identity. On a night where everyone expected Indiana to fold, she showed that quitting was never an option, and her grit became the spark that lit up the entire team. With the guard rotation gutted, Indiana had no choice but to shift their entire attack inside, and Aaliyah Boston embraced the challenge like the paint belonged to her alone. From the opening minutes, she established deep position, sealed defenders with her strength, and forced Seattle to collapse. Double teams came, but they didn't matter. Boston powered her way to 27 points, hauled in 9 rebounds, and anchored the defense with the kind of presence that left the Storm visibly frustrated. By halftime, the numbers told the story. Indiana was out-rebounding Seattle 42-21, a margin almost unheard of at this level. Every missed shot seemed to land in Boston's hands. Every possession turned into a second chance. Seattle's guards tried to penetrate, but traffic clogged the lane. Their front court tried to body her up, but Boston simply wore them down. Possession after possession, she looked unstoppable, and the Storm's confidence cracked under the pressure. It wasn't just dominance. It was leadership. Boston wasn't waiting for Clark to return to set the tone. She was carrying the team now, proving that Indiana could play through adversity and still look like a force. And her command of the paint laid the foundation for what the rest of the Fever were about to do next. Boston may have been the anchor, but she wasn't carrying the fight alone. Odyssey Sims, a late-season addition, played like she'd been part of the Fever for years. She attacked off the dribble with confidence, pushed the pace in transition, and hit the shot that sent Gainbridge Fieldhouse into chaos. A deep three from the logo that dropped clean through the net. It wasn't just points on the scoreboard. It was a declaration. Sims was fearless, and her swagger gave the Fever the edge they needed. Right beside her, Kelsey Mitchell delivered her trademark consistency. She piled up 21 points, stretching Seattle's defense with her perimeter game and silencing every run the Storm tried to mount. Whenever it looked like momentum might swing back, Mitchell answered with a quick trigger jumper or a cold-blooded three. Even without Caitlin Clark's spacing, Mitchell's steady hand kept the offense balanced and dangerous. Together, Sims and Mitchell turned Boston's interior dominance into a complete attack. Instead of looking like a desperate, shorthanded roster, the Fever suddenly looked like a team with multiple weapons, one that could punch from every angle. And as the game wore on, it became clear this wasn't survival, this was domination. By the second half, Indiana no longer looked like a team scraping by without their star. They looked like a unit that had discovered a whole new identity. Every possession carried intent. Defensive rotations snapped into place. Bodies hit the floor for loose balls, and the Fever dictated the pace instead of reacting to Seattle's. The numbers told the story. They held the Storm to just 3 fast break points all night while pouring in buckets off stops of their own. On offense, it wasn't just Boston inside or Sims and Mitchell outside. It was the balance between them. Indiana moved the ball with confidence, racking up 22 assists on 36 made field goals. Their rebounding edge was overwhelming, their paint presence suffocating, and their energy contagious. Even the bench fed off it, cheering and leaping with every hustle play. What started as a night overshadowed by injuries and distractions turned into one of the Fever's most complete performances of the season. They didn't just survive without Caitlin Clark. They redefined themselves. Sweeping Seattle 3-0 on the year and climbing back into the playoff race, the Fever sent a message loud and clear. They were more than just one player. Even as the Fever celebrated their biggest win in weeks, all eyes eventually drifted back to the one player not in uniform. On the very night her new Nike logo was plastered across the arena, Caitlin Clark sat courtside in a warm-up fit, smiling and cheering but unable to take the floor. It was a striking contrast. The brand was everywhere, yet the star herself was still missing from the action. But after the game, the buzz shifted. For the first time since mid-July, Clark had been cleared for full practice. Not just shooting drills, not just walkthroughs, real, live action with contact. Coach Stephanie White made it clear there was still a process ahead, but this was the final hurdle before her return. With only 6 games left in the regular season and the playoff race tightening by the day, her comeback couldn't be more urgent. Reports suggest Friday's matchup against the Sparks could mark her long-awaited return, a chance to reintegrate before critical showdowns against Phoenix and Minnesota. For Fever fans, it's more than just the hope of Clark's highlight plays. It's the chance to unleash a version of Indiana that pairs her offensive gravity with the toughness the team just displayed without her. The question is no longer whether Indiana can compete without Clark. They just proved that. The real intrigue is what this team becomes when she's back. The Fever's win over Seattle wasn't just another tally in the standings. It was a statement. They proved they can fight through injuries, silence doubt, and impose their will even without the league's brightest star on the floor. Lexie Hull's toughness, Aaliyah Boston's dominance, and the firepower of Sims and Mitchell gave Indiana a blueprint built on grit, balance, and resilience. But now the story shifts. Caitlin Clark is almost back, and with her return comes the possibility of a team that isn't just scrappy, but dangerous. If they can dominate shorthanded, what happens when their superstar rejoins the fight? This game wasn't about Clark's logo on the walls or the hype in the stands. It was about the Fever proving they're more than one name, more than one brand. And with the playoffs looming, the question isn't if they can make noise, it's how loud that noise will be when they're finally whole.